I'm Annalisa Canto, and I'm a teacher of English at an Arabic language school. This is the Empower Your English bonus on fossilization and errors often made by Brazilian learners of English. So let's start. It is rather common for learners of English to repeat the same mistakes for years and years, isn't it? Have you thought about this? There are some mistakes that students reproduce without correcting them, either because they don't know they are wrong or because they don't even notice them. Sometimes these mistakes happen due to mother tongue influence or unknown false friends. These repeated mistakes are called fossilized errors, and the process is often referred to as fossilization. But why the words fossilized and fossilization? So, just like those ancient creatures that once roamed the earth became preserved in rock, our errors may also be preserved, not in rock, but in the language we speak, becoming what we call fossilized. Fossilized errors are hard and petrified, and thus not easily changed. First, because like I said before, some students don't know they are errors. Second, because these errors have become a habit, and old habits are extremely difficult to be modified, right? And third, fossilized mistakes are not easily changed because speakers rarely notice them. Well, the speaker may not realize that he or she is making a language mistake, but a fluent listener will surely hear it. So, don't get me wrong, your mistake will be heard. So let's do something about it. Well, initially, we may think that only beginners make fossilized errors, but that is not the case. As a matter of fact, elementary students do, of course, make mistakes. However, fossilized errors tend to happen to students who have been learning a language for quite some time, and thus these students have advanced their level of English, but along with this advancement, they have preserved certain mistakes. It is also interesting to note that fossilization usually occurs with basic level structures that are carried over into intermediate and advanced levels. And these grammatical errors make your language sound rather rudimentary too, don't they? And you don't want to continue using basic level English, right? Are you ready to fly higher? Okay, so you've made the decision to change a fossilized mistake. That's excellent, because your error may be hindering or limiting your communication. Or you may have some other strong reason to do it. For example, you aspire a job position that requires fluent English. You're traveling and want to be understood, or you need to pass that English test. In any case, in order to eliminate a fossilized error, you must have a strong reason to do so. Do you want to know why? Because fossilized errors are hard to get rid of. Well, you need some strategies then to eliminate all those fossils, all those skeletons in the closet. And that's what we're going to do here to empower your English, okay? So initially, we're going to look at some examples of fossilized mistakes, errors commonly made by Brazilian learners of English. We'll analyze them, trying to understand what's wrong and why students make those mistakes. And then afterwards, we'll go over some strategies to help you correct these mistakes. Fossilized error number 1. Brazilian students of English frequently say, I have 20 years old, instead of I am 20 years old. She has 32 years old instead of she is 32 years old. Remember that in English, the verb have is usually used for possession, such as I have a car, I have a dog, she has a pencil, etc. And in the case of age, you don't own your age, rather you are a certain number of years old, because as soon as you're born, you're aging. But the brain plays tricks on us And as Brazilian speakers, we tend to translate directly from Portuguese into English, and thus the recurrent mistake of saying, I have a certain number of years old. Do you make this mistake? Are you sure you don't? Fossilized error number 2. This is probably the most frequent mistake made by Brazilians learning English. Using have instead of there is or there are in the case of something that exists. For example, have a book on the table, whereas the correct form is there is a book on the table. Or usually have a lot of people in Maracanã Stadium instead of usually there are a lot of people in Maracanã Stadium. Have is for possession in general, as explained in fossilized error number 1. And you, do you make this mistake? Fossilized error number 3. Not including a subject in the sentence or phrase. For example, it's good, it's raining, when you should say it is good, it is raining, or it's good, it's raining. Many times the word it works as a filler for the subject and actually doesn't mean anything, but it has to be included in the sentence. This example may seem rather simple, so let's look at a longer sentence. I like the film because is fun. Well, in this case, you need to insert a subject before is fun. And so the sentence should be, I like the film because it is fun or because it's fun. Since in Portuguese we sometimes can omit the subject, the brain translates directly from Portuguese into English and you make the mistake. Please note that when Portuguese and English structures are similar, learners tend to get them right. It is exactly when Portuguese and English differ structurally that learners tend to make mistakes. So analyzing the structural or grammatical differences between Portuguese and English will be of great use to you. Fossilized error number 4. In the middle of a conversation, learners of English mistakenly used he instead of she and she instead of he. Now, here's a mistake that speakers themselves hardly ever notice. But listeners get completely lost in conversation because they lose track of what the speaker is referring to. In this case, you might need somebody else to point out to you that you've exchanged he for she and she for he, and you may not even believe it. And when your listener starts making funny faces, you'll know that something is wrong. Have you ever noticed if you make this kind of mistake? No? Think about it. Fossilized error number 5 is the lack of third-person s in the present simple. For example, he play football instead of he plays football, or Maria do the homework instead of Maria does the homework. English present simple verb tense conjugation is fairly straightforward, so you shouldn't be making this mistake, should you? Well, why put an S in the third person? S is for plural, isn't it? And he, she, it aren't plural pronouns. But it is what it is. That's how English is. Take it or leave it. When the teacher talks about this mistake with the learner, it becomes clear that the student knows the rules of third person S. And all the exercises carried out in class about this topic are done correctly by the student. But when it comes to real life conversation, then it's a different story. All rules seem to be forgotten by the students. So it takes awareness, remembering, a little thinking before speaking, if that's possible. And what about you? Do you make this mistake too? Are you aware of it? Fossilized error number 6. Yes. Using auxiliaries in questions is error number 6. Does Portuguese use auxiliary verbs in questions? No. So Brazilian learners of English tend to forget these auxiliaries when they speak English. For example, what kind of music you like, instead of what kind of music do you like? Or where Maria lives, instead of where does Maria live? Do you make this error? Do you want to change? Well, there are many fossilized errors that I could go on and on and on, simply because all mistakes can be preserved if you don't make the move to change. It's like having a bad eating habit. It depends on you, only you. A teacher may guide you, make a lot of reference posters to call your attention, but the change will require your initiative and willpower and your desire to change. Fossilized errors may involve all sorts of mistakes, from recurring pronunciation errors to recurring spelling mistakes, etc. You may even have your own fossil collection, and you may have them in your mother tongue too. For example, using seja instead of seja in Portuguese. What we need now is action. So let's investigate some strategies to overcome these errors. Strategy number 1, being aware of the error. How? Start noticing how you talk. Record yourself on audio or video. There are so many apps these days that you can use on your cell phone or computer. Another option, ask a friend or teacher to help you out by listening to you and pointing out the mistake. Remember that some mistakes that you make are tolerated by your listeners. And by this, I mean to say that your mistakes are usually heard, but they are not mentioned because they don't stop communication in general. But this doesn't mean that you shouldn't change the way you speak. Strategy number 2. After you're aware of the error, which is strategy number 1, you can then make a conscious decision to change. Well, easy to say, difficult to do. Like I said, it depends on you, on the student. Strategy number 3, understanding your error and learning the language point. How can you change something if you don't understand it? So get to know what the problem is. Study it. Get some classes. Go online. For example, if your error is related to auxiliaries, find out the rules for using them and why they are so important in English. It may also help to know the reason behind making an error. So reflecting is a good option, though some reasons may never be known. Strategy number 4, dealing with one error at a time. It might be a good idea to focus on one mistake at a time, or 2 at the most. Concentration is the key. Strategy number 5, practicing. Well, practicing is extremely important. You may talk to yourself in the bathroom, you may improvise sentences while walking, or you may write down sentences to organize your thoughts. Writing comes to many people as a very helpful tool. But remember, practicing, as good as it may be, may not help you if you don't have a strong wish to change, because we're talking about fossilized errors. So you may practice in class, do several online exercises, but still make the same mistakes when you engage in spontaneous speech. How can you improve then? Let's see the next strategy. Strategy number 6, doing what I call conscious speaking. That is, thinking while you're speaking or just before speaking. I know it takes a lot of effort and it is tiresome because you're constantly using your brain at full capacity, but that's what it takes to change. When you're aware of the mistakes you commonly make or of the possible situations when these errors occur, an alarm should then go off in your mind, alerting you of a possible trap. For example, you're going to use the false friend actually, and you know it's a difficult word to use. So an alarm goes off in your head telling you to be careful. And if you still make a mistake, you may correct yourself there and then because you're aware of it. Another good idea is to monitor your listener in critical situations. Watch the listener and monitor the conversation. You may change a word or phrase, or rephrase the sentence for better understanding if you notice that your listener starts making funny faces. Strategy number 7, keeping a detailed record of fossilized errors so you can track them and deal with them. Let's say there may be stages to correcting fossilized errors. For example, in the beginning, you unknowingly make the mistake. Someone else tells you and you become aware of the error. Then, on a second stage, you make the mistake, but you're able to correct it because you're aware of it. And on a third stage, you're able to speak without making that mistake. So it might be a good idea to have a notebook section for repeated errors, for example. Strategy number 8, reading and noticing the correct grammar use. Start reading more and you'll slowly but surely internalize how English flows. So, to conclude, you've seen that a fossilized error may take some effort and some time to correct. After all, it took a long time to form. But it may be corrected as long as you're patient and most of all decide to go the extra mile. I can happily repeat these explanations about fossilized errors several times, but I can't learn them for you. So you have to assume the responsibility for your own learning in order to empower your English. Thank you very much and hope to see you again soon.